So we went through is we did really three things. We addressed the people who claim that Hashgacha Protis is impossible, that divine providence, that the fact that Hashem watches everything is impossible. And the two arguments were, number one, that Hashem is too big to care. And as we described, that only when you think Hashem is the biggest of all things, then Hashem is too big. If Hashem is transcendent, then he can choose to care. In other words, if Hashem is the biggest, the primary cause, the biggest... So if Hashem is the primary being, so he's the biggest of all things, then as things are less significant or less big, then they should matter less. And therefore the fact that Hashem should care about what happens in this world is too low for him. That's a common argument. That was one argument, and we addressed that by saying that that's, as you said, that's only true if you think Hashem is the biggest thing out there. But Hashem transcends the whole idea of big, small. All of it is transcendent. He created the whole notion of small and big, and therefore he can choose to care about the smallest of things. The pasuk says, "Hamagbi l'sheves." Yeah, Hamagbi. What's the pasuk? That he raises himself up and then lowers himself down to be in the world. And we quoted the Gemara and the Psukim, which talk about this idea of Hashem being exalted, and precisely because it's exalted in the place of his greatness, that's the Gemara says, in the place of his greatness, that's where he sees humility. In his place of his greatness, you see his humility. And the fact that he's fully transcendent, that's where you can see that he chooses even the smallest of things. That was the first thing we addressed. The second thing we addressed was the idea that how is it possible that Hashem knows something? Knowing means there's something outside of him that he's going to acquire, and that would mean a change. Like when I acquire new information, I change. I don't know the information, I'm finding out about it, now I know it. Now, Hashem obviously is unchanging, so what does it mean he knows things? So we explained that the Alter Rebbe highlights that which I say, just say, Hakol Golivia Dua. It's all known to him as opposed to he knows about it. That is, it's known automatically. It's not automatic because it's all within him. And this is not the example Alter Rebbe gives, but the example we gave is your imagination. You don't need to go find out about your imagination because everything's in there. So you know about it automatically. So because everything's within Hashem, it's not a perfect marshal, but it gives you an idea. Because everything's within Hashem, so it's known to him automatically. And therefore, the fact that he knows things doesn't change who he is. It's just because it's all within him. It's not outside of him. Okay. And then we explained Hashgacha Protis, divine providence, pre and post Baal Shem Tov. Okay.
Or even the grass. That's
before the Baal Shem Tov, the understanding was that Hashem watches the world, Hashgacha Protis, even though I think everything's within him and all the rest of that. But Hashem watches the world. Hashgacha means to supervise. He supervises the world for the sake of reward and punishment. And therefore, only those worthy of reward and punishment would be supervised on an individualized manner. That's what Hashgacha Protis means, individualized supervision. Right? So, human beings can make mistakes, have free choice, therefore they're rewarded and punished. And therefore they're worthy of supervision on an individual level. But blades of grass don't have reward and punishment, and therefore there's no reason to supervise every individual blade of grass. Just generally speaking, Hashem supervises each species to make sure that the species survives, and that's it. It's what the Rambam calls Hashgacha Minis, Hashgacha over the species, or others call it Hashgacha Klalis, a general supervision, not Hashgacha Protis, not an individualized supervision, the way the Baal Shem Tov envisioned it. And the reason why the Baal Shem Tov envisioned Hashgacha Protis on an individual level, each individual item is supervised, as we explained, it's because it's based on the idea that everything has a purpose. Hashem brings everything into being every single second. And he's bringing it into being because he has a purpose for it. And therefore Hashem has to supervise, so to speak, each individual item to see and make sure it's in the right place at the right time to fulfill its purpose. So we're switching while Hashem's supervising, reward and punishment to purpose. And finally, we learn from the Frierdiker Rebbe that not only does each individual item have a purpose, and therefore Hashem watches each individual item, but the purpose for each individual item is connected to the purpose of the entirety of creation. Because there is only one purpose. And every single item has to be in its place to be part of that general purpose. And therefore, the purpose that this individual blade of grass has is connected to the purpose the entire creation has. And therefore, you think about that, how much more so
that's even bigger.
Humans and the Jewish people are at the center of this purpose, how much more so Hashem supervises each individual act and item and place they go Like the Yom Yom says, a person has to know that every step he takes is by divine providence, and he should be in that place at that time to do X, Y, Z mitzvah or whatever Hashem has in mind for him to do in that moment. So this is a recap of what we've done so far. Now, as promised, we have the reconciliation between the pre and post Chassidus. To reconcile these two things. So we have in front of us is, the first page here is from Shar Tshuva. Shar Tshuva is a book from the Mittel Rebbe, the second Chabad Rebbe. And then after that we have, based on this passage in Shar Tshuva that we're going to read, we have a page in Likutei Sichos, which is the Rebbe's work, where the Rebbe spells out for us the way to reconcile pre and post. So you can grab a booklet there. Nice to see you. On the next page, we have a page from Likutei Sichos, which is a book that Rebbe edited. It was transcribed talks that the Rebbe gave, and it was edited later. And here the Rebbe spells out, based on what this passage from the Shar Tshuva, spells out how we can reconcile the pre and post Chassidus view. And first I'll translate what it says there, and then perhaps give some explanation, because it's not exactly 100% clear. At least there are some questions that could be raised. Okay, so on the right-hand side, just after the parentheses, so the line starts with the word Pefrat, and then the next word is Chulu, and then there's a closed parentheses on the right column on the top. Six lines from the top. Yeah. Because it's known, divine supervision, there are Beis Madregas, 2 levels. Aleph number 1, an external, translating literally, and again I'll translate literally when I get to the Rebbe's thing, but I'll add some explanation afterwards. Aleph number 1, from the external elements of the divine, so to speak, that are derived from the backside, so to speak. The Shem Elokim of the name of God known as Elokim. So what does this mean, the backside of Elokim? What does it even mean? Tahaim is to say, they come through myriads of intermediaries. Divine supervision comes through these intermediaries. Behester v'helam, through concealment and withholding and hiding. Acher helam, one concealment after another. Achem belubish, until he's invested belavush sak, in the like this very lowly garment. Derech hateva, that is the ways of nature.
Sak was like a bath.
Like a sack.
A sack.
Yeah. Meaning it's a lowly garment. It's paraphrasing from the Megillah, right? So it comes through nature. I insert them through the 70 ministers. Each minister is responsible for another nation and another element. Mazolis, and the various different mazolis are the constellations. The noiga dasiya of noiga, which is an element of klippa dasiya of this physical world. Okay, so the first way in which Hashem supervises this world is through the mediums of nature. That's basically what he's saying. But nature itself happens through myriads of concealments from Hashem, right? Nature doesn't express Hashem, nature conceals Hashem. When you look at nature, you say, oh, it's all perfect, you don't need Hashem. So nature is in and of itself a concealment. So to get the divine energy, so to speak, which is purely divine, to be invested in something as lowly or something as high, something as concealing as nature, it goes through levels and levels and levels of concealment, spiritual concealment, until finally the divine energy is invested in nature. And then this divine energy is what supervises the world. And because it's in nature, you don't see it. And therefore it's called chitzoni, it's called external. Because you don't see the divine supervision here, it just looks natural. So that's one way. Now, he puts in parentheses a very important caveat. The afal pi, even though all of nature and all of these intermediaries we described earlier are only, quote, this is paraphrasing the pasuk in Yeshaya, they are like axe in the hand of the wood chopper. That is to say, they have no free choice. Nevertheless, it's still in there. So referring to Pesukim as in that someone could lead a way to think that Hashem is not present in this world because he's so far away because of these intermediaries. Nevertheless, even though they have no free choice, nevertheless Hashem is invested in them in some very deeply concealed manner. And this is what we mean when we say that the presence of Hashem is in exile. That is to say, the presence of Hashem is in a place where it's not revealed And that's what's exile. Exile is a place where you can't express yourself. You're not in your homeland. You're somewhere else. You can't express yourself. You can't live the way you want. You're being ruled by something else. So Hashem, so to speak, is invested in living, so to speak, in a place that isn't obviously divine. So it's considered Golos Hashchina, the exile of the presence of Hashem. It's a paraphrasing from the Gemara. Kidduaz is well known. Nevertheless, Hashem's kingdom rules over all. God's king over all nations. Who's not going to fear him? The king of the nations. All the earth will fear him. He's bringing verses that say that Hashem's fear and Hashem's rulership is beyond just the Jewish people. It's around the whole entire world, even though Hashem is invested in these concealments. So they are concealments. They're not intermediaries. We call them intermediaries because from our perspective, it looks like they run the show. And that's the point. That's what makes it concealment. It's a concealment because it doesn't look like Hashem runs the show. It looks like nature runs the show. So that's one way in which Hashem supervises the world, is through nature. And this is external. This is an external expression of the divine because it's not obvious. That's number one. Rabbi, and the second one is the second form of divine supervision. Hashgacha pnimis. This is the internal supervision. Pnimis elokus, from the internal divine. Hainu, Hashem Avaya Belakim, that is, from the name of Hashem in Elakim. So it's in Elakim because it's also in nature. Elakim expresses Hashem as he is presented in nature, as we explained in the previous paragraph. And Yud Kei Vav Kei is Hashem's transcendent name where Hashem's name is obvious. So it's also in Elakim because we still live in the world of nature. But it's like Hashem's internal mechanism operating in nature, if that makes sense. I'm not going to read the parentheses. Okay, let's go to top of the next line, the next column. Brings different verses, but just to explain what's going on here. If you go to the left side, five lines from the top, the second to last word. If so, Hashgacha zu, this supervision, the internal supervision, is to investigate and see the pathways of man, to judge them in accordance with their actions. Dafka specifically, therefore, the primary divine supervision is on human beings, even in the world. Nineveh, Hashem judges the entire earth, even non-Jewish. And the middle brings a Rabbi from Nineveh, which is non-Jewish. Right, the story of Haftarah on Yom Kippur, where Hashem sends a prophet to rebuke the people of Nineveh, which aren't Jewish. Other psukim which prove that Hashem judges other nations. However, the divine supervision is in all creation. Even that which grows is the Baal Shem Tov's chiddush, as we explained before, that Hashem watches every single thing. So even that which grows, and that which is inanimate, because Hashem gives life to everything. And it is kindness, etc. He feeds the highest and lowest to find them sustenance. Then there, I think the Gamal Hardim. On the mountains, in the highest and lowest things, that which grows and that which is inanimate. Timter, another pasuk. But there's internal supervision and external supervision. Like by way of example, a king in his house, and the city of his kingdom, that he'll watch himself. But the rest of his country, will have ministers and governors to watch each individual, what's it called? State, district. But they won't do anything without the king. Eretz Yisrael, that Hashem's eyes are upon it individually. So to the Jewish people are under the jurisdiction of Hashem's individualized, personal, internal supervision. When they're doing what he wants. But if they don't, then they too are cast off to the external thing. We'll explain what this means in a minute. I'm under the rulership of the 70 ministers, which is the package of nature. Okay, so in recap, and before we get to the Sikh, whatever takes this apart and connects this to the Rambam. We have internal. He uses the example of a king whose own home in his own city, he operates and supervises himself. The other districts, he hires ministers to do that for him. But unlike the king here in the physical example, the ministers and the governors essentially have free will. The ministers that Hashem hires, so to speak, to run the rest of the world don't have free will. It's nature. The difference being, is the presence of the king obvious, the presence of the king concealed. And that's the difference, even though also both of them run through nature, right? Because the way in which the king supervises his own city is not like he has a different set of rules than the governor who supervises a different city. It's the same set of rules. What's the difference? If the king is there or not there. Right? Is the king revealed, the king not revealed? So it all happens through nature anyway. The difference is it coming from a place where Hashem is, so to speak, Hashem is not interfering with the system. Hashem is is Hashem not interfering with the system, and Hashem is just letting the system go the way it is, even though it's all Him? Or is Hashem actually looking to make the system work the way He wants it to work, so to speak? And that's the internal experience of divine supervision. These are very subtle things to understand, but I hope we're following, getting a sense of it.
That's the difference between Elohim and the other name.
That's right. The difference between the name Elohim and the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. And that's the two different types of Hashgacha, two different types of divine supervision. So you can see already what we're going to reconcile the pre and post Chassidus.
In the Chumash, the name Elohim is used up until a certain point. Yeah,
the first
it doesn't get introduced until later on.
That's right, because creation is done by Elohim. That's concealment. Only later in the second time, then it mentions Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Yeah, right, and later Hashem reveals to Avraham, Shmi Hashem, I never told him about my name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Hashem says, like, this is a higher level and revealing to you, Moshe Rabbeinu.
Right.
Right. This is the internal, so to speak. It's not a place of concealment. It's a place where Hashem is obvious. Okay. Now let's take a look at the Sichos on this next page. It's a beautiful Sicha, and the whole Sicha should be learnt and relearnt with all of its footnotes because it's very deep. But here we have some of it. Okay, I'm going to translate literally, and then I'm going to try to give some explanation. Aber in Emerson, the truth is nit kein kusha. There's no question here. I'm just making a reference to something else. Und das ist very verstandig. This will be understood. Like them was the Mitleb is mevayer, based on that which the Mitleb explains, and we just read that. As das was the Rambam halt. The fact that the Rambam is of the view, the Rambam bring pre-Chassidus, as this is not who says that there is no individualized supervision on that which grows, on that which is inanimate and animals. And likewise the wicked. The Mitleb mentioned that also, that if a person misbehaves, then he is cast off out of the internal Hashgacha and put into the external Hashgacha. So he's taken out of Hashem's individualized supervision and put into Hashem's natural supervision. So he just runs the course of nature. And that's his, quote, punishment, right? You cast off the burden of Hashem, so Hashem casts you out of his individualized personal purview. That's the Rambam describes what happens. So these two views, this view of the Rambam is nitkin stira, is not a contradiction. So Shittas the Baal Shem Tov to the view of the Baal Shem Tov, which says that each individual existence in this world is supervised individually by Hashem. Baal Shem Tov says, as says Hashgacha Protis, if all and everyone, that there is individualized supervision on everything that's all creation. So how is there no contradiction? In the Hashgacha, because in divine supervision, there are b'chlolos, generally speaking, two manners in which Hashem can run the world. Aleph, the first manner in which Hashem runs the world, or supervises. Hashgacha primis, an internal supervision. That is to say, the Hashgacha is begalui. The supervision is revealed and open. This is, sie is nit behalten. Hashem's supervision is not concealed, on fardekt and covered durch levushia tevet through the medium of nature. But again, der Hashgacha, and with respect to this supervision, the Rambam says, Aziz like der dvekus von seichel adam balakus. It's dependent on the person's mind connection to Hashem, to godliness. So Rambam describes a person's elevation in life and how he becomes more and more intellectually elevated to the point that his mind become in consort, in communion with Hashem. And that's a person who gets that gets the highest form of divine supervision, the tzaddik. And as he gets lower, as he gets more and more disconnected from Hashem, he has less and less divine supervision. So the Rebbe is saying, it's not that he has no supervision at all. It's that he doesn't get the pneumistic supervision. He doesn't get the revealed supervision in direct connection to Hashem. But he ends up going to the supervision that's under nature. And that's how he says that the Rambam, even the Rambam would say that the supervision over everything. Following? See where he's going? But when it comes to plants, living thing, plants, inanimate and animals, when the shoyim and the wicked, those who cast off Hashem's supervision, in the Hashgacha, they don't have this type of supervision, which is an ofen prati in a specific individualized manner, because Hashem is watching each individual one of His chosen people to see how they're doing and to punish and reward and to make them in the right place, etc. Not if in, but they end up being cast out into the natural supervision, which only makes sure that the species as a whole survives. They're in the generalized supervision. So that's one version that's one type of supervision, the internal supervision, and that goes for those who are connected to Hashem. Beis, Hashgacha chitzonis, is an external supervision. The Hashgacha is malubish behela. This supervision is enclosed and concealed in levushi teva, in the medium and in the clothing of teva, of nature. Ukiyetz and the like. What's ukiyetz? What else is there? Maybe he's referring to the Ayin Sarim, the 70 ministers, I don't know. The Hashgacha, this supervision, is faranef ala nevroim, exists on everything, masim l'shittas Baal Shem Tov, in accordance to l'shittas of Baal Shem Tov. So when the Baal Shem Tov says that everything is under divine supervision, right, that means that every single existence in this world is under divine supervision through the rules and laws of nature. But the supervision on the Jew, who's connected to Hashem, is not under the rules of nature, but under Hashem's divine purview, which says, we're going to make this happen in this way, even if it happens to bend the laws of nature in some way.
Is this only to answer the Rambam, or this is really what the Baal Shem Tov says? Huh? Does the Baal Shem Tov really hold that the whole thing is, even the grass
comes from nature?
Between Pimis and Chitzonis, everything.
Well, we learned from the Frierdiker Rebbe, right? When the Frierdiker Rebbe says that Hashem is watching everything because, in the Baal Shem Tov's view, because Hashem has a purpose for everything, but the Frierdiker Rebbe conceded that as you get more central to the purpose, the more intense your supervision is, right? So even in the Baal Shem Tov's view, the way in which Hashem supervises a blade of grass is not the same way Hashem supervises a Jew. Because a Jew is much more central to the purpose than the blade of grass is. The blade of grass, true, has a purpose, but that supervision doesn't have to be as intense as the supervision for a Jew who is the center of the purpose, right? So there is even a distinction there. So now that I was giving it different words, right? And as you saw from the Mitzvah Rebbe, who says the same thing. So that was going to give different words. So when something is not as central to the purpose, Kaylee, this is already my interpretation. Let's first
the regular answer of Totally Madrigas.
Let's first learn what it says before I give my interpretation. But my interpretation, I think, will help a little bit.
Is it just man's perspective to Hashem rather than Hashem's perspective to man? Because the more man learns and engages in Torah, his eyes change. He sees the world differently. So now he could view. That
might be correct. I happen to agree with you here, but let's see. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Because in the meantime, it almost seems like the difference is not just in the way it's perceived, but actually the way it is.
The way that
one's in nature,
changes.
exactly.
Right.
But as we're going to see, it could just be a matter of perception. Mm-hmm. It's quite possible. Let's see. So so it comes out, says the Rebbe, as das Rambam, even in accordance, in the view of the Rambam, is faran hashgacha pratis. There is divine individualized supervision of Rishoyim, even on the wicked. Even though the Rambam said they're cast off to mikra, they're cast off to happenstance. That's how he describes it. They're cast out to mikra because they're outside of the purview of Hashem's individualized supervision. I want to make sure that you're doing okay and rewarding a punishment. The person wicked, he cast off Hashem, so Hashem casts him out. This is the way the Rambam describes it. So it says the Rebbe, it doesn't mean that he loses divine supervision. It says Nar as by Zay, it's only that for them is the Hashgacha chitzonis. They get this. They go into the purview of the external supervision. On Gitan, that is to say, the supervision is enclosed, unfar, I guess, and hidden in levushi teva, in the package of nature, right? So it almost seemed like it's actually a change in the actual supervision, not just the perception. Azoi, as it says, niker, v'yeder prat kum von der Eibishtin, to the point that it's not visible, it's not apparent that everything comes from Hashem, even though it does come from Hashem, right? Und es ist kein Stil nicht zu dem, was steht, and therefore it's not a contradiction to that which it says, and the Rebbe quoted this verse earlier in this talk, which says, that the verse says that if a person misbehaves, he's going to be cast out, and he will be found by all the negative things, as if to say it's going to happen automatically by happenstance. The negativity will find him, not because Hashem is going to send it to him as a punishment, but he'll find it because you live in nature. Nature's a dangerous place. You'll get hit. This is the way the verse describes it. So this idea that Hashem is actually individually supervising it, but it's only just that it's concealed in nature, is not a contradiction to the fact that the verse says it happens to you automatically. When the Rambam actually translates this up as miz mufka l'mikra. A person's mufka means like he's set free to happenstance. So the way the Rambam describes it is that there's no supervision here. It's cast off to happenstance. And they're saying, no, there is a supervision, but that supervision is concealed in nature. So it seems to be a little different. So you have to reconcile that.
So does that mean that the tzaddikim are protected by Hashem?
Yes, that's the point here. We're talking about now the Rishayim. What happens to those who are not in the purview of Hashem's individualized supervision? And so the Rambam describes it as cast off to happenstance. And the Rebbe is saying it's not really cast off to happenstance. It's that they're put into nature. And nature is another mode in which Hashem supervises the world. Through the medium of nature where it's not obvious that Hashem is supervising, but it's still individualized supervision. So is it individualized supervision to concealment, or is it happenstance? Which one is it?
Isn't there that idea that like a tzaddik in front of behemoths will not get attacked because but if he's Russia or somewhere in between, he's more susceptible?
It's connected to this idea,
How can it be happenstances if everything is controlled by Hashem?
This is what we're learning now, right? This is the point we're learning here.
Initially.
This is what we're trying. This is exactly the point of our discussion. So the Rambam says that it actually happens in happenstance. And the Rebbe is trying to say, no, that's not really happenstance. It's divine supervision concealed in the package of nature. So how do these things come together? That very mode of happenstance is Hashgacha Protis. That is by the individualized supervision. Even the happenstance is. The verse says, this same verse which says that you're going to find the bad because you're misbehaving. The verse says, I will conceal my face. But not that I'm gone. It's concealed. So I'm concealed in happenstance. So the Rebbe is saying like this, that even happenstance, this is a massive chiddush. When you learn the Rambam's words, and he said that a person is cast off the happenstance, you think he's cast off the happenstance. The Rebbe says no. He's cast off the happenstance, that is to say, Hashem now invests or conceals his individualized supervision over you into happenstance.
So there is no happenstance.
Exactly. Happenstance itself is individually supervised. It's a mind-blowing idea when you think about it. It's not that Hashem removes his supervision. Nor says, I conceal my face. It's a concealment on the internal supervision. Which goes to what you were saying, that it seems like it's only a question of perception. Right? Bisvanen, to the point that a mensch can sich einreden, the point that a person can talk himself into, as that his troubles, in an open form, he can think that how do these troubles come to me? By way of happenstance. This is minig olam. This is the way the world runs. Or the nikra nikris, it's just a happenstance of all happenstance. But the truth is, as the Hashgacha al the divine supervision, is even now in the happenstance in every single individual thing. It's a mind-blowing idea. So what is essentially the difference between, now this is what the Rebbe says here, but now let's get to, let me give a little bit of my interpretation. It's based on the footnote. We don't have a lot of time, but let me explain. You'll remember we said in the previous classes that even if you're of the view that Hashem only supervises human beings on an individual level, and the rest of it is all generalized supervision on their species, you'll remember that we said that even according to that, I think I mentioned it in the recap earlier, that even according to that view, Hashem knows everything. Why? Because knowledge is not outside of him, it's known to him. So the difference between Hashem's knowledge of something versus Hashem's supervision over something. Knowledge of something means it just exists within him, so he knows it, it's all known to him automatically. Supervising means there's a certain purpose. Why is Hashem individually supervising that? Now the question becomes, why should I watch something? Okay, reward and punishment, so that's only for human beings. But everything is still known to him. That's one level. Then there's another level. And this is what the Rebbe is translating into the Rambam. Everything has individualized supervision, not just knowledge. because everything is known to him because it exists within him.
And nothing to do with reward and punishment.
1 second. Everything happens by divine specific supervision. The question is only if the recipient is Hashem going to make his supervision over you in such a manner that you are aware that it's from him, or is Hashem's supervision over you going to be in such a manner that you feel that it's just happenstance in nature, and that's the whole difference.
Is that from your effort?
That's the person.
Is that from your effort?
The person's perception.
Which means that you can change it, and that's what Rebbe goes on to say. Rebbe goes on to say like this in the next paragraph. It's mind-blowing. Why did Hashem put you in that happenstance? The point is not just that the person should be cast off, God forbid. The point is that the person should realize, oh my gosh, look how far I am from Hashem. So which means, deep down, in this concealed version of supervision that looks like it's packaged in nature, is really Hashem's deepest supervision over you to try to make you get back to acknowledging that it's all from Hashem. Right?
You have to be able to see that, yeah.
But how do you?
It's incredible.
See, but how do you see that if you're so far off?
Right.
And that's the difference.
Right.
That's the hardest part.
That's right.
You can't see it if you're
That's right.
far off.
So Hashem will.
That's
right. So Hashem will make some shocking happenstance to you that smacks you in the face and says, "Oh my gosh, where am I in my life?"
It'll cause SARS.
Something like that. So, but it looks like it's in nature, but it's not. Right. And here, there was also Deborah doesn't, and this is again my interpretation here, but Deborah doesn't touch on the main distinction we described earlier between the pre and post Baal Shem Tov. Over here, the Rebbe only addresses the pre and post Baal Shem Tov in the question of, is it individualized over humanity or individualized over everything? But the question of why is Hashem supervising for reward and punishment versus purpose, that Rebbe doesn't address. Right? Because in the Rambam's view, well, at least in the pre-Chassid's view, mostly it comes from reward and punishment. And therefore, animals and don't have reward and punishment, therefore no need to supervise them individually. But human beings do. But the Baal Shem Tov says that supervision is because of purpose, and everything has a purpose. That doesn't address that here. So how do we deal with that a little bit? I don't have a direct answer to this, but it would seem to me that the Rebbe is learning that it's like the Chassidish version of what reward and punishment is. Reward and punishment themselves are not merely reward and punishment. Right? There's two different versions there's two different versions of what reward and punishment is within Torah. Is the reward unrelated to the act you're doing, right? I hire you to build a house, and I give you cash. You built the house, I give you cash. There's no connection between building a house and cash. The only connection is that you inconvenience yourself by building a home, so I reward you with something that you want. But there's no direct correlation. The other version of reward and punishment is you planted a field, now you get to go eat the fruits. So your reward is direct result of what you've done. So Chassidus goes with that version, that the reward you get both in the world to come and Mashiach's coming is directly built, by your behavior. Not just you inconvenience yourself to serve Hashem, so Hashem gives you back something pleasant. It's a direct result and built by your actions. To understand this a little bit more, you do a mitzvah, but the mitzvah is a divine act. You don't necessarily feel that now. What's your reward in the world to come? You get to feel how that was a divine act. There's nothing more pleasurable than that. A person does a sin, which is an act of disconnect from Hashem. Here you don't necessarily feel that it's a disconnect from Hashem. Right? You don't necessarily feel that. You go into the world to come, and you feel what it means to disconnect from Hashem. It's very painful. Right? So it's consequence versus like a... So if that's the case, then even the reward and punishment serves as part of the purpose. Even the reward and punishment serves as part of the purpose. And therefore, for this person who's cast out of Hashem's individualized supervision, his reward and punishment, which really is a service to get him to do teshuvah, the punishment is that because he's behaving with Hashem as if everything's happenstance, he gets treated that way, that it's all happenstance. But that really is, in and of itself, Hashem's individualized supervision that is done with a purpose, so he do teshuvah. So all of it gets within the package of, this is what Hashem wants for you on an individualized level for the purpose that he has. The question is only, is it going to be obvious to you because you're behaving like the way you're supposed to? Or is it going to be in such a manner where you feel like it's happenstance because that's how you're behaving with Hashem?
So
Somewhat clear?
For the person,